Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Mark, and as always, I'm joined by the times incredibly, times insightful Jenny.
Hey Mark, always a pleasure. And, I've been hearing some whispers, some buzz, something about Instagram and group chats. Fill me and our listeners in.
Oh, you're going to be intrigued by this. So Instagram is cooking up something they're calling community chat. It's still in testing, but the leaks are, well, they're pretty fascinating. Imagine group chats, but like on a potentially massive scale, we're talking up to 250 people.
250 people? Whoa, that sounds intense. How's that any different from, say, a regular group text or even Instagram's current broadcast channels?
See, that's the key times difference. Broadcast channels are one way, right? It's just the creator pushing out information, kind of like a newsletter. Community chat, from what we're hearing, is fully times interactive. Everyone, and I mean times everyone, in the chat can participate.
Okay, so it's like a giant, ongoing conversation. But 250 people? How in the world would they moderate that? I'm already picturing the spam and, the potential for spirited times disagreements, let's say.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The reports times do times mention built-in moderation tools. Admins will supposedly be able to remove messages and members. But, Meta's track record with moderation hasn't exactly been pristine.
That's putting it times mildly. We've seen how quickly things can spiral on other platforms, even with much smaller groups. This feels like a huge times undertaking. Where did you even hear about all this anyway? It's not officially announced, right?
Right, it's still in the prototype phase. A lot of the info is coming from Alessandro Paluzzi, an app developer who's, famous times for spotting these things early. He's basically the tech world's Sherlock Holmes.
So we're relying on leaks, but fairly reliable ones? I guess it makes sense. Instagram's always trying to keep up with, or even get ahead of, the trends. This feels like a direct response to the popularity of Discord, maybe?
I think you're spot on. The comparisons to Discord are everywhere. Discord's really nailed that sense of community, especially for, those niche interests. It's like Instagram wants a piece of that pie.
But Discord has all those servers and channels. It's built for this kind of, organized chaos. How would Instagram, which is so visually driven, handle that level of text-based interaction?
That's what I'm really curious about. Maybe they'll integrate it with existing features, like maybe linking chats to specific posts or stories, or perhaps it'll be a completely separate tab. The possibilities are, a little overwhelming, to be honest.
It sounds like it could either be a great way to build closer-knit communities, or a complete and utter mess. I guess it all comes down to the execution, and especially, times that moderation piece, like we said.
Exactly. And, let's be honest, the potential for misuse is definitely times there. We've seen how quickly things can go sideways with online groups. The ethical implications are pretty significant. Balancing free expression with keeping things safe and, positive.
It's a tough balancing act. On the one hand, you want to encourage open conversation and connection. On the other hand, you don't want to create a breeding ground for harassment or misinformation, or worse.
And with 250 people in a single chat, that's a lot times the potential for things to go off the rails. It's going to take some serious moderation muscle, probably a combination of AI and human moderators, I'd imagine.
I'm also wondering about the integration with the rest of the Meta ecosystem. Will we see community chats popping up on Facebook or WhatsApp eventually?
That's a great question. It wouldn't surprise me times. Meta's been pushing for more cross-platform integration lately, a unified messaging experience across all their apps. It almost feels inevitable, doesn't it?
It could be convenient, but also a bit much. I already feel like I'm juggling a million different messaging apps. Adding another layer? I don't know. I mean, what do you think, listeners? Are we going to have app overload?
I hear you. It's that classic dilemma, convenience versus complexity. But, I have to admit, the potential for creators is pretty interesting. Imagine being able to host a live Q&A with your followers in a dedicated chat that's a powerful tool.
That's true. It could be a significant shift for how creators interact with their audience. More direct, more personal, but also more demanding of their time and attention, I'd think.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure. But that's often the case with new tech, isn't it? It's all about how we choose to use it, and how the platform chooses to, manage times it.
And speaking of management, Mark, let's dig a bit deeper into this moderation nightmare scenario. We've talked about the tools, removing messages and members, but how proactive can they really times be? Are we talking about real-time moderation, or is it more of a reactive, clean up the mess after it happens kind of deal?
That's the crucial question, Jenny. From what I've gathered, it seems like it'll be a mix of both. They'll likely have AI-powered filters to catch, obvious keywords and phrases, maybe even image recognition to flag inappropriate content. But with 250 people, there's bound to be stuff that slips through the cracks. That's where human moderators would come in, but how many would they need? And how quickly can they respond?
It's almost like setting up a mini police force for each chat, isn't it? And then there's the question of bias. We've seen how algorithms can be biased, reflecting the biases of their creators. How do they ensure fair and consistent moderation across all times these chats, across different languages and cultures?
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. And it brings up another point. Transparency. Will users be able to see *y times a message was removed or a member was banned? Will there be an appeals process? Because, mistakes times will times happen.
Right. And what about the potential for coordinated attacks? We've seen groups deliberately flooding platforms with spam or hate speech. Could a community chat be targeted in the same way? It seems like a pretty big vulnerability, to be honest.
It definitely is. And it makes you wonder, what's the incentive for Instagram to get this right? More engagement means more ad revenue, right? But a toxic environment could drive users away. It's a delicate balancing act.
It is. And what about our listeners, Mark? What questions should they times be asking about this? What are the potential downsides they might not be thinking about?
Well, I think privacy is a big one. We're talking about potentially sharing personal information, opinions, maybe even photos and videos in a group of 250 people. How much control will users have over who sees what? And how secure is that data, times really?
Good point. And what about the impact on our mental health? We already know that social media can be addictive and contribute to feelings of anxiety and inadequacy. Could these large-scale chats amplify those effects? Will we feel pressured to constantly be on and engaged?
That's a very real concern. It's like the fear of missing out, but on steroids. And will there be tools to help users manage their time and notifications? Can you mute a community chat? Or leave it temporarily without, causing a social faux pas?
Okay, I'm going to throw out a poll question to our listeners. Here we go. Do you think 250-person interactive chats can be effectively moderated to ensure safe conversation? Yes or no? Head to our website and give us your thoughts.
I like it. And here is a discussion question. What are your concerns about integration of community chats across multiple Meta platforms?
Oh, that's a good one. And with that question for our listeners, thanks for breaking it down, Mark.
Anytime, Jenny. And to our listeners, let us know what times you think about community chat. Are you excited? Anxious? Somewhere in between? We'd love to hear your thoughts.